What's up YouTube? KS Gun Guy here. Thanks for joining me today as always. If you like what you see here, do be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and there's plenty more content on the way. So I'm really excited to bring to you the HK VP9SK. This is a brand new release from HK, and frankly, in my opinion, it's kind of a long time coming. I've been a fan of the VP9 for several years now. It's become really a favorite here on the channel and just in the collection, but I've always wanted something just a little bit smaller because I'm a fan of subcompact guns. If you've seen some of my other videos like Glock 26, the Smith & Wesson 9C, the Springfield Mod 2, the Subcompact, and I'm a fan of that size of gun, and so I was really excited when I heard that HK was finally bringing this on. I heard some rumors at the end of last year, but it finally kind of came to surface just a few months ago, and so here it is in front of you. So of course we're going to be talking about the specs of the firearm and all the features of the firearm, how it's very similar to its older brother, but how there are a couple of subtle differences, including one major difference, at least in my opinion. Of course we're going to be wheeling in some shooting along the way, the whole 9 yards, and I'll be excited to hear what you guys think about this as well. So first things first, of course, this is unloaded. I do have an unloaded magazine in here. I just prefer that, as you know. So let's go ahead and knock some specs of this little guy out of the way. The overall length of this firearm is 6.61 inches. The height is 4.57 inches. The width is 1.31 inches. Get you a little bit of a look there on the width. The barrel is 3.39 inches. The weight is 23.07 ounces, so it's not terribly chunky, which is great, even though it's a little bit bigger than some of its other competition, like the Glock 26, that sort of thing. And then for this particular model, this is actually the LE version. This came with 3 10-round magazines, and I'll go ahead and show you. This is the flat base magazine right here, and it is a 10-round steel magazine, very similar to what you would find in the VP9 or even the P30 line. And then I've got one of the other two magazines. The other two that came in the box actually are an extended pinky magazine. However, I guess I call it a pinky magazine because you can put your pinky there. But it does not add any rounds. You know, that's kind of, your mileage may vary. It would have been nice, I suppose, if it had been a +1 or something like that. There will probably be aftermarket support pretty quickly for this, if not already. However, it's still nice that they give you a little bit of an option with the flat, especially if you're concealed carrying and worrying about printing, but give you another option, actually 2 of these as well. So we'll throw that back in the mix here in just a little bit, but let's go ahead and talk about just some of the features of the firearm. Now, we'll kind of go bottom to top as best we can. Starting out, of course, it has the much expected VP9 ergonomics, and what I mean by that is certainly the grip contour and just the overall feel of the firearm. Now, a couple of really nice things about VP9s and even P30s in general are all of the different plates that come with it. Of course, a lot of guns these days come with back plates, small, medium, large. This would be the medium right here, which is really nice. However, HK takes it a step further, and I know this is kind of a pile of grip plates right here, but these are actually 4 side panels, 2 on the gun, of course, and then 4 extras, and once again, small, medium, and large, the medium coming on the gun. But the nice thing is you can switch these out with just 1 roll pin, and you can mix and match to your heart's desire. In fact, you can get up to 27 different combinations with this. Again, just the same as its larger siblings, which I think is really cool. So you can really customize that feel to fit your hand and your needs. So just, you know, the exact same thing you would come to expect from HK, of course. Now, from a grip texture standpoint, all the way around the grip, front, back, and sides, you've got the kind of standard squigglies. Now, one thing I wish the VP9s, all of them, came with were actually the grip plates that are similar to the P30 line. I think the aggressiveness and the grip texture is just a little better on the P30 line, and I wish they could interchange, but unfortunately, at least for the bigger models, they don't. Now, perhaps this one will with the P30SK. I'm not sure. I haven't tried that yet. But just the same, again, it's really nice to have all of these options. And the grip texture is certainly good enough to keep this gun locked in your hand. So aside from just the grip, the ergonomics again are absolutely fantastic. You've got all of your finger grooves, and it's just very well contoured to your hand. Now, as we move up the gun, one thing that's pretty unique with the VP9 or HKs and a couple of other manufacturers as well is the European paddle style magazine release. Now, this is ambidextrous, and one thing that a lot of people comment about, it's kind of hard to wrap your thumb around and get the magazine out with your thumb. I would agree with that. However, what I find is really easy is to use either your index finger to eject that, because when you're not shooting the gun, you're not using your index finger, or you could actually use your second finger as well to eject it. And that's actually what I do. I have to lose my grip a little bit, but I regain my grip very quickly as I'm putting a new magazine in the firearm. And if you practice with that, I know a lot of people say training really helps with that. I'm kind of a believer of that too. If you train with it or practice with it, even if you're just kind of sitting around playing with, of course, an unloaded firearm, that can really make for a smooth transition into the paddle style magazine release. So I'm going to come back to the trigger and actually the trigger guard here in just a little bit. I'm going to leave that aside for a moment, but let's move a little bit further up the frame. Of course, you do have an accessory rail for lights, lasers, grenade launchers, and although I've said in previous videos on single stacks and even subcompacts, I could really take or leave the accessory rail. It's nice that it's there, and I think it gives it kind of a nice, a little bit more, I guess, aggressive look to it, which is pretty cool, that cool factor there. But generally speaking, I wouldn't necessarily put any sort of a light. But again, for those of you who want to, it's really nice to have that option there. So as far as the slide lock, slide release, it is ambidextrous, which is nice once again for you lefties. So this is really a fully ambidextrous firearm right out of the box, which again is really nice. Now, I've wheeled in a couple of other guns recently, like the CZP-10C and the FN-509, and both of those also have ambidextrous out of the box magazine releases. Now, those are a little bit more firm. This one really is built and ready to go. I think HK's had a little bit longer to really refine that technology, that paddle style release, and so I think it works really well. However, it's not the standard Americanized, whatever you want to say, button that's right here, maybe even on both sides. So your mileage may vary on that, but something that I really like. Now, as we move up into the slide, it does have very nice slide serrations both on the front and the back, so if you're into doing any sort of press checks or anything like that, you can definitely do so. Another thing that's pretty unique with the VP9, and I think it met with a little bit of, I don't know if I want to say controversy, but some people had question about this. It has these little polymer ears on the very back of the firearm, and this is actually to help aid in racking the slide. And I'll tell you, at first I thought it was ridiculous looking, but I have found that it actually is very handy. It's really nice. Now, you can remove these. All you have to do is take off the back sight, and then you can take these off. And there might even be little covers you can get for them. I'm not sure. I've never actually seen a VP9 with these off, but they don't get in the way at all, and they do prove pretty useful, especially racking the slides. So I've chosen to leave these on. I imagine most people probably do, but again, you can remove them if you want. Now, as far as the sights go, the LE version does come with night sights right out of the box, which is very nice. There's your sight lineup right there. The non-LE version, those are just the, I call them glowy sights. They gather a little bit of ambient light, and they glow for a certain amount of time. You would find those on some of the other HK products as well, and those are fine and good. I think those are more of a Novak style, certainly with the back. versus these, which have certainly a very defined ledge. In fact, almost a hook in the back, so you can really dig in and get good one-handed manipulations if you would like to. And they're steel and all that good stuff. So, these sights, the LE, I think they're worth it. You do pay a little bit of extra for it, you know, 60, 70, 80 bucks, whatever it is. But if you're going to switch the sights out anyways, it's nice to have that option. So I chose to do that. But the overall fit and finish of the firearm is absolutely fantastic. I mean, HK does a great job making sure that everything is very refined and very clean, and I find this to be the case. So it's been a real pleasure to be able to get into a smaller VP9 and have a little bit of fun with that. So before we get to the shooting, let's go ahead and talk about the trigger for just a moment or two. And I said that there was one significant change that was made to the VP9SK, and that's going to be with the trigger guard. Now I'm going to be bringing in its bigger brother here in just a little while, and I'll show you the difference between the two, but I won't do it just yet. But in the other model, there's actually a little bit of a valley that goes in the middle of the trigger guard. And what can happen is it can catch your finger, depending on if you shoot with the pad of your finger or the knuckle, like I do. Yes, it's a terrible habit, I know. But it can actually make for pretty quick blisters to develop, depending on how low you try and grab that trigger. Now, that valley is gone, which is fantastic. I mean, it's really been the major criticism I've had of the VP9, at least from my shooting experience. So there is no longer that valley there, and I think that makes for just a more pleasurable shooting experience, and not having it be prone to potentially catching your the pad of your finger or your first knuckle in that little valley right below the trigger. So that's really nice. I like that quite a bit. Now, as far as the trigger itself goes, you know, it's funny, when I pulled the trigger at the store when I was buying this, I said to myself immediately, yep, that's a VP9. Incredibly consistent, and I've always liked the VP9 trigger. I'd say for me, in my opinion, it's certainly in the top 5, top 4, maybe even top 3 triggers that I have in my collection and that I really enjoy shooting. It's very light and crisp, and it's just it's very consistent. So we'll take a look at the trigger real quick and just kind of see how this does. We might pull the Lyman gauge a couple of times and see how that works. But so here it is. It's a smooth uptake. There's one little bump as you move through the uptake, and it's the exact same on the big VP9. And once you get past that, and of course that does work itself out as you continue to shoot the firearm, but once you get to that, you get to a very defined wall. And the really nice thing is, you'll notice that the trigger does not stop at the very back of the trigger housing. It actually has, I don't know, half an inch or so left there. So it's a break almost in the middle of the trigger guard, which is really nice. So once you've got your wall, there's your break right there. If you'll notice, there was a little bit of distance to get to the break, but it's very clean and very smooth. And then your reset, and your reset's out maybe 2 or 3 millimeters or so, and then you're back to your break again, and there's your reset. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but my finger tends to get kind of tossed out a little bit as I go back for the reset. And once again, that's very consistent with the bigger VP9s. The spring in here is pretty it's pretty excited, and it definitely wants to get that trigger back out to the reset. So it's something to definitely get used to. But once you get used to it, you can really get these guns going, and it really is a smooth and fun shooting experience. So how does this trigger weigh? Let's go ahead and take a look here for just a moment or two and see how this does. We'll pull this just a couple, 2, 3 times. I don't like to do this very many times on camera. I have tested it off camera, but let's take a look and see how it does. So that's 6 pounds right there. I know I can do a little bit better than that. I've said this before, I'll say it again. I'm not terribly good with this, and also being with a camera right in the middle makes it a little bit more interesting to pull these things. Okay, so there's 5 pounds, 4.9 ounces. We will do this. We might do it 2 more times just for the sake of argument, but I promise that will be it. Okay, 5 pounds, 12 ounces. Now keep in mind, I've only got 200 rounds through this, so it definitely has a little bit of break-in time left in it. But So 5 pounds, 8.5 ounces. If we were to average that out, it'd be maybe 5 pounds, 10 ounces, something like that. And that's not bad at all, considering this trigger is definitely very crisp, and it's reasonably smooth. Not the smoothest out there, and I certainly wouldn't say that, but it is certainly consistent. And if you're used to HKs, especially VP9s, nothing has changed. It really is it's a good trigger. Not the best, but definitely a good trigger. So, speaking of triggers, how does this thing shoot at the range? Well, let's take a look and see how this does. All right, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that footage at the range. So at the range, it's a fantastic shooter. I've always enjoyed shooting VP9s. I think they're a pleasure to shoot for whatever reason. For this shooter right here, I seem to connect reasonably well most of the time with it. And I walked away with this feeling pretty much the same way. I mean, it shot well, and it felt like home. I mean, it felt like just a slightly smaller VP9, and that's really what it is. So, speaking of that, how does it stack up to its bigger brother right here? So I do have its bigger brother. Now, unfortunately, all I have are loaded magazines with this. I will tell you that it is unloaded, of course. I generally don't do this, but for the sake of demonstration, I do have a loaded magazine. I will not rack the slide, and we will check for clear when we are all done, of course. But for size comparison, let's take a look and see how these two guys stack up to each other. So from a height standpoint, here we go. I mean, we're looking, see if I can kind of tilt this your way here just a little bit. So we're looking at roughly an inch of difference between the two from a height standpoint. Basically, you're losing one portion of the grip grooves and the contours there. So about an inch. And then from a length standpoint, I do believe these are butt to butt here. So we're looking at about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch difference from a length standpoint. And then of course the trigger guards stand exactly the same. Nothing is different. The rest of the gun is exactly the same. So you're just getting a trimmed down VP9. So let's go ahead and get its big brother out of the way. This is not a comparison video. Just thought it'd be interesting to see what the difference is in size. Now, another thing that I did find interesting, and unfortunately I don't have a P30SK anymore. I did have one. I had a V3 version, which is the double action, single action rather. But it wasn't the light trigger pull, and I really wanted the V1, and maybe I'll do that down the road. Who knows? But unfortunately, don't have it anymore. If I did, I would definitely compare these two together. I do know that the P30SK is just slightly smaller, almost all the way around. Now, the width is almost the same. However, the length and the grip are just a little bit smaller on the P30SK, and the width even, by a fraction of an inch, or even a fraction of a tenth of an inch, but there is a little bit of a difference there. So if you have any holsters that go with your P30SK and you're wanting to transition to this, they may or they may not work. You'll have to kind of play around with that and see. I really thought that the dimensions would be identical between the two, but unfortunately they aren't. It would have been kind of cool if this had been just a tiny bit smaller all the way around. However, this works just fine. So at the end of the day, the HK VP9SK is a fantastic firearm. I mean, again, I make no bones about it. I'm a fan of HK in general, and also certainly the VP9. So very excited to have this version of it, and this is one that I will definitely carry, and I'll certainly wing in or roll in future videos and compare to some other subcompact firearms. But I'd love to hear your comments on this, see what you think, and let me know your experiences with this if you've got them, which is awesome. I'm excited to hear those. Otherwise, again, be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks.